I'm a paramedic and I work for the South Western Ambulance Service, and I'm based on the Devon Air Ambulance. I'd like to tell you an incident that I attended in 2011. We were on base and the red phone rang, and that only means one thing. So my colleague, who's also a paramedic, and our pilot went out to the aircraft to get it ready for flight, and I took the details of the incident over the phone. Once we were on the ground, we grabbed our bags and ran up the road, the very same piece of road that the car had travelled a few moments earlier. I can remember there was a wing mirror, a hubcap, and lots of other bits of car scattered around. And my colleague was fairly quick to be able to confirm that the driver was still alive, and I was then able to confirm that the passenger was still alive, although unconscious. I knew she was alive because of the noise coming from her airway, which was starting to block. It was very frustrating for me not to be able to really properly assess and treat this young girl, who I later found out was 19 years old. Because such was the extent of the damage to the car, the driver and the passenger were essentially encased within a cage. The metalwork had collapsed around them, the doors couldn't open, the roof had collapsed, and the front of the car had also come inwards onto their legs. And we just couldn't really get to the patients, the two girls, to really do what we needed to, what we were there for, to look after them. The fire service were fantastic. They worked so quick, and they truly recognised the urgency around needing to cut the car apart. We were able to then drag my patient out of the car onto a rescue board and to the side of the road. We needed to put a large needle into her chest to release the pressure, and there were a number of other things that we had to do before we left the scene. When we arrived in the resus department in the hospital, we were met by the trauma team. After my handover, essentially my job was done, and all I needed to do was complete my paperwork. However, of course, you never really leave these things behind. And I couldn't stop thinking about this girl and how serious she was. When I woke in the morning, the very first thing I thought of was she still alive? So when I got into work, the first thing I did was I rang the hospital to see what the news was. I was told that she had gone into the theatre and that she was made stable enough to transfer to the trauma centre, which was great news. However, I am aware that many patients like ours die just a day or two later through complications. So I knew she wasn't out of the woods, particularly when I found out the full extent of her injuries, which were a fractured skull. Her neck was broken in 2 places. She had a punctured lung, lots of broken ribs. Her pelvis was shattered and her legs were broken. She had internal bleeding from her liver and her spleen, and her diaphragm was also disrupted. And I know that any one of those injuries on their own can kill, and she had all of them. So really, I have to say, I was very feeling quite realistic, I suppose, that she was unlikely to survive. And then, of course, I had lost touch of what was happening because, you know, I had other patients that came along, just like this young girl, and I lost track of what had happened. Only to find out many months later that in fact she had survived, which was quite incredible. I met one of the police officers who was at the scene, and he told me that she did survive, and we were contacted at the Air Ambulance charity about a year or so after the incident, and we were asked if, as I found out later, this young girl called Tash and her family could come up to the airbase to meet us, to meet the crew that looked after her that day, which was quite an emotional reunion, I have to say. And my immediate thoughts were, I didn't recognise her, I have to say. I didn't recognise her. She had lost weight, and she had very poor mobility, having spent 7 months in a coma and many more months convalescing at hospital before being discharged home. She spent quite a lot of time in a wheelchair, but through rehab and an incredible determination has done very well and is mobile now. But Tash will never be as mobile as what she was. She will never be the same again. She will always carry the injuries with her. She is a remarkable young girl. But I can't help to think that it's all so unnecessary and it didn't have to happen in the first place, and her life has been changed forever. And the reason I'm telling this story is because I don't want this to happen to you. I don't want this to happen to anybody else. Thank you for listening.